He didn't flinch when Martin cut him off. That's the first thing I remember. Not the sound of the air vent rattling above us, not the smell of bitter office coffee, not even the suffocating silence that fell over the table after Martin's voice landed like a slap. Just Eli sitting perfectly still, pen in hand, eyes focused, not angry, not even embarrassed, just quiet. That kind of quiet that made you feel like you missed something important, something seismic. The meeting had been going in circles, as usual. Martin was in rare form, pacing by the whiteboard like a TED Talk reject, pontificating about institutional wisdom and why gut instinct still matters. That's what he always did when he didn't know what the hell he was talking about. Eli had been sitting to my left, flipping through the printed compliance packet like he actually cared. Most of us skimmed those things. Not Eli. He had sticky tabs, color-coded annotations, and a half-finished draft open on his laptop that nobody had asked for. He waited for the right moment and spoke up. Calmly. Clause 11C directly contradicts federal CFR Title 14 updates issued last quarter. If this goes to audit, and Martin cut him off with a chuckle that wasn't really a chuckle. You're too young to understand policy, son. Let the grown-ups handle it. That was it. That was the moment. Eli didn't defend himself, didn't argue. He just closed his laptop slowly, like someone gently placing a chess piece. Checkmate, not now, but soon. Hey, before we dive deeper into this story, if you're listening and haven't subscribed yet, take a second and do it now. It helps us keep going and bring you more wild true stories like this one. And if you're feeling generous, hit that like button. Seriously, it means a lot to our team. Now back to the chaos. See, what Martin didn't know, what none of us knew really, was that Eli didn't just understand policy. He memorized it. He lived in it. While Martin was bragging about martinis with state reps and war stories from some 2008 procurement seminar, Eli was cross-referencing federal compliance indexes on his lunch break. The kid had his own spreadsheet of every Beventech policy tagged against current legislation. I know, because I saw it once when we shared a conference room and he forgot to close the tab. It looked like a murder board for data regulations. The worst part? Martin loved using Eli as his little show pony until that day. Until Eli made him look small. You could feel the temperature drop in the room. That fake fatherly tone Martin used? Gone. He stopped referring to Eli as my sharp young analyst in emails, started calling him junior support. Subtle, but deliberate. And when the next revision cycle came around, guess who was mysteriously left off the invite list? I ran into Eli at the coffee machine a few days later. I asked him how he was doing. He smiled, tight, unreadable, and said, "I've been reading up on document trails." "Like metadata?" I asked, trying not to sound stupid. "Like signatures," he replied. Then he walked off with his coffee and didn't look back. There's this thing about people like Eli, they never yell. They never rant in Slack channels or slam doors or stage big dramatic confrontations. They just observe, record, prepare. And when it's time, they pull the one thread holding the whole mess together. You won't even feel it until the floor caves in. And Martin? He was already dancing on that floor in tap shoes. The guy submitted his own finalized policy draft 2 days later, completely scrubbed of Eli's notes. I knew because the timestamps in the internal system didn't match. Martin filed it at 11:47 p.m. after hours with no co-reviewers listed, a ghost edit. Eli didn't fight it. He just downloaded the original version, his version, and saved it to an encrypted folder on a private drive. I know this now because I was there when the regulators asked for the document author who touched Clause 14A. And Martin, bless his ego, said, "It was just some junior analyst. I barely let him touch the final draft." He had no idea that in that moment, the only thing standing between him and a federal audit meltdown was the same kid he dismissed over stale donuts and a policy packet. But back then, Eli just went back to his desk, opened a new folder, and labeled it Vexler Redacted. No caps lock, no exclamation marks. Just inevitable. By the time the rest of us were crawling out of the office Friday evening, Eli was still at his desk, headphones in, face lit by 2 monitors and a spreadsheet that looked like it could steer a rocket launch. Most of us would have taken Martin's little stunt and checked out, coasted until something else came along. Not Eli. He treated that dismissal like a diagnosis. Not terminal, but urgent. The kind you don't cry over, you research, you dig, you make a plan. It started small. A flagged comment here, a footnote adjustment there, then it ballooned. He was pulling statute language from 6 federal databases, crosswalking it with past vendor violations, threading it into policy clauses like a compliance surgeon. And he didn't just rewrite the manual, he annotated it with hyperlinks, with citations, with appendices so clean and logically structured, I swear they could have been submitted to a federal hearing. On Monday, he quietly uploaded it to the internal policy revision system under the standard naming protocol. INT-COMP draft R3YEA, timestamped, tracked, signed. He didn't say a word to anyone, and then, like clockwork, Martin struck. At 7:03 the next morning, while most of us were still nursing coffee, Martin uploaded his version. Same title. No citations, no hyperlinks, no annotations. Just buzzwords and filler fluff stapled around 2 of the worst clauses in the whole compliance tree. One of which, I later realized, still referenced a repealed guideline from 2016. It was lazy, it was risky, and it carried his digital signature, except not entirely. See, Martin had done something sneaky. He'd used admin credentials to override the file log, pushed his revision as the active version, then wiped the contributor metadata and replaced the summary line to read, "Revisions made in consultation with junior staff." That was it. The only acknowledgement Eli even existed. And Eli? He watched it happen in real time. He never said a word, but I saw what he did. The moment that new file appeared in the system, he exported the original version, his version, to a personal encrypted drive. Then he opened a new folder on our shared compliance tracker and named it Obsolete, Martin Final. That title alone was like a razor blade hidden in a birthday card. Later that day, he emailed himself a copy of every Slack message and internal memo tied to the policy update, with timestamps and thread links. He even flagged the meeting calendar where Martin removed him as a co-editor. It wasn't spite, it was precision. Eli didn't operate out of revenge. He operated like a case file was already being built. He just didn't know who'd need it yet. The best part? Martin had no clue. He strutted through the office that week like a man who'd won, talking about how regulators don't want clean, they want simple, bragging about how his version would keep the wolves off our back. Even bought donuts on Friday like it was a victory parade. But I noticed Eli's expression when he bit into one. Calm, focused, like he was eating a pre-game meal before a deposition. And then came the memo, slipped into the company-wide feed on a Tuesday morning like a passive-aggressive ghost. Notice of routine compliance review, Federal Audit Oversight Division, scheduled, TBD, scope, randomized file check per interagency mandate. No external communication until review is complete. Martin chuckled, shrugged it off. Just a puff audit, he told the team. Happens every few years. I've danced this dance. But Eli didn't shrug. He started printing, slowly, methodically, one section at a time, collated, indexed, clipped. No one noticed him walking to and from the printer with a red folder labeled Ref FC4713. I only caught it because I was waiting for a tax invoice to print, and there he was, quiet, calm, stacking pages like evidence for a crime nobody knew had been committed. I asked him once quietly, "You think they'll really dig deep?" He looked up at me, deadpan but not cold. "They'll dig until someone gives them a reason not to," he said. Then he smiled, faint and tired. Martin just gave them 3. The memo hit inboxes at 6:17 a.m., just vague enough to rattle nerves, just official enough to be real. Due to a breach reported by one of our third-party partners, Beventech Solutions may be subject to a randomized compliance spot audit under Section 12.4 of Interagency Oversight Protocol. Please ensure all records are up to date. No sender name, no signature block, just a single line in red. Do not forward externally. The panic started by 6:30. Martin was already in the war room with a whiteboard marker, drawing arrows and writing acronyms like he was planning a hostage rescue. I watched him pace, muttering to himself about vendor risk shielding and deniability structures. That's when the call started. to legal, to procurement, to that one poor soul in IT who always looked like he aged 5 years after every meeting with Martin. By 9 a.m., half the team was locked in impromptu strategy syncs. Only Eli's desk stayed untouched. He wasn't invited to the meetings. His name wasn't on the prep emails. Hell, the break room gossip even started referring to him in the past tense. "You think the kid's gonna take the hit?" someone whispered near the vending machine. "He's too clean," someone else muttered. "Too quiet. Martin probably sees him as insurance." Eli didn't flinch. He just listened. Sat at his desk, typing calmly, headphones resting around his neck, eyes half-lidded like none of this surprised him. But I saw it in the little things. He stopped leaving his laptop unattended. He started emailing himself PDFs of calendar invites. He even re-requested access logs from the internal document repository, claiming he was updating version history documentation. I asked him, half joking, if he was planning a compliance bunker. He just said, "No bunker, just backup oxygen." Then came the draft chat log. It wasn't meant to be seen by anyone outside Martin's inner circle. But someone forwarded it to me by mistake, thinking I was on the ops team. It was a Slack thread between Martin, a junior director, and our legal liaison. All casual, all lowercase, like they were swapping lunch orders. Martin: "Fed's gonna need a name if this escalates." Liaison: "You thinking procurement?" Martin: "Too messy. Kids better. No history. Expendable." Expendable. That word. Like Eli was a cartridge you toss after printing a single page. I stared at it, sick to my stomach. And Eli? When I showed him the screenshot, he didn't blink. Just saved it to a folder titled Contingency Pre-Audit, then thanked me like I'd handed him a stapler. That's when I realized he wasn't scared. He was already watching it all fall into place. Martin started changing file names, removing timestamps, asking team leads to verbally confirm things instead of putting them in writing. There were closed-door huddles by the printer bay. An entire week's worth of compliance tasks suddenly marked resolved with no ticket trails. HR started poking around with vague scheduling emails. "Just checking in," they said. "Quick alignment chat," they called it. And through it all, Eli stayed still, but not passive. He updated a folder on his external drive every night before logging off, labeled each day like a diary entry. Wednesday, auth logs. Thursday, procurement ref. Friday, triage call recording. I asked him, finally, why he was bothering. Why not walk away and let Martin burn himself? He turned to me and said, "Because if he pushes the narrative far enough, truth becomes an afterthought, and I'm not going to be someone's afterthought." I didn't have a response. Just watched as he reopened the policy doc, his version, double-checking every reference, every statute, like a man preparing for trial. And Martin? He kept strutting around like a peacock in a thunderstorm, too loud to hear the rumble, too arrogant to smell the smoke. They showed up at 8:42 a.m., 3 of them. No badges, no wind-up, just black blazers, plain binders, and a silence that made the whole floor freeze like someone had pulled a fire alarm in reverse. Regulators. Real ones. The kind that don't knock. The kind that already know the answer to the questions they're about to ask. Martin was mid-joke when they walked in. Something about his golf swing and a state senator who owed him drinks. He blinked when he saw them, tried to smooth the moment over like he was hosting a surprise party. "Morning, folks. You caught us between donut runs. What can I help you with?" The tallest one, a woman with gray streaks in her braid and eyes like radar, didn't smile. "We'll need the most recent copy of your internal compliance policy, full metadata and submission logs. We'd also like access to your external vendor correspondence from the past 2 quarters. Martin froze for half a second. Just half. Then he plastered on that smirk he always used when bluffing. "Of course. Should be right in our repository. I'll have someone pull that up." By someone, he meant me. I opened the folder, located the file, Martin's version, and watched as it loaded on the big screen in the small conference room we'd turned into a regulatory war bunker. The moment it hit page 9, the woman with the braid leaned forward and squinted. Clause 14 references policy language from CFR Title 15, she said flatly. That section was repealed last fiscal year. Martin blinked. "We operate on legacy timelines. The internal document was still in review." "No, it's marked final." one of the others said, flipping through the metadata, and submitted 2 months ago. No revision logs, no co-authors, just M. Wexler. You could almost hear the blood leave Martin's face. I felt Eli before I saw him. He was already standing at the doorway. One of the regulators turned toward him. You're listed as junior compliance analyst. Did you contribute to this version? Martin jumped in like a panicked game show contestant. He helped draft parts, sure, just filler language. He's a bright kid, eager to learn. But this version? I finished it myself. Big picture stuff. You know how it is. And then Martin looked at him, really looked at him, with that same greasy, fake dad grin he'd always used. Right, Eli? Just say you helped with the sections I didn't have time to polish. No need to complicate things. I held my breath. Eli didn't even blink. He stepped into the room, calm as a surgeon, and placed a small black flash drive on the table. Do you want the signed version, he said, looking the lead regulator dead in the eye, or the correct one? The silence was biblical. Martin's mouth opened like he was going to laugh it off, but nothing came out, just air and panic. The lead auditor picked up the flash drive like it was a scalpel. We'll take both. What followed wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no finger pointing, just slow, methodical unraveling. Eli sat across from them as they pulled up his version. I watched from the hallway as their expressions shifted, eyebrows rising, lips tightening, notes being scribbled with increasing urgency. This version hyperlinks every clause to its live federal source, one whispered, and references the breach protocol under Section 28F. Martin's version doesn't even mention Section 28. Where was this stored? Eli answered every question with quiet precision. Date, time, location, submission record, and then he slid over his email thread history, highlighting the exact message where Martin removed him from the contributor loop. Martin stood in the corner like a statue built from crumbling ego, hands twitching at his sides. Why didn't you push this version forward? One of the regulators asked Eli directly. His answer was quiet. Because I wasn't authorized. I was told I was too young to understand policy. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stood there gripping a half-full coffee cup and watching the moment a man's entire illusion collapse like a house of glass in a windstorm. Martin tried one last swing. Look, we're a fast-moving company. Maybe some lines got crossed. The kid meant well, I'm sure. His version is compliant, the lead auditor cut in. Yours is not. And you submitted yours under false authorship. Allegedly, Martin muttered, eyes darting. Eli just sat there, unshaken, composed, and in that moment, he didn't look like a junior anything. He looked like a man holding the matchbook over the gas-soaked floor, calmly waiting to see who struck first. The sound of that flash drive clicking into the auditor's laptop was sharper than it should have been, like a key in a lock, like the exact second a lie stops working. They projected Eli's version onto the screen. No serif font fluff, no bloated paragraphs, just pure, clinical clarity. Hyperlinks glowed blue like veins through every section. CFR codes embedded next to every clause. Page after page of statute-synced content, each line cross-referenced against the most current revisions, some of which had been live for barely a month. Martin's version looked like it had been written by a man drunk on acronyms and ego, Eli's. It looked like federal gospel. The lead auditor leaned back. Your version acknowledges the vendor dependency chain breach under 12C and mandates a 14-day disclosure window. Martin tried to play dumb. I mean, that sounds right. Maybe it just didn't make it into the version I filed. You removed it, Eli said softly, opening a folder titled Redacted MV Audit Trail. The room went dead quiet. Inside the folder, an export of deleted edit history, dated, time-stamped, and, most damning of all, flagged under Martin's unique user login ID. The change logs didn't lie. They never did. Here, Eli said, pointing to the screen, is where the clause requiring immediate third-party breach notification was deleted. Here's where the language aligning with OMB A130 was stripped, and here's where the cross-reference to vendor encryption protocols under FASEMIA was replaced with to be defined. To be defined? One auditor repeated, incredulous. Martin looked like he wanted to melt through the floor. That was placeholder language. I meant to fill it in before submission. But you signed off and submitted it as final, another auditor said, voice flat. No placeholders allowed, especially not in a post-breach climate. Then came the folder Eli had been quietly building for weeks. Internal emails, Slack screenshots, calendar removals, even the automated timestamp where Martin had overridden the system to replace Eli's original draft. Each one marked with a note and a link to its source. It wasn't a folder, it was a case file. I also preserved my internal communications, Eli said, still not raising his voice. Just in case. Legal walked in halfway through. Their faces said everything. Martin tried to pivot. Let's not make this adversarial. We're all on the same team. No, the lead auditor replied, standing up. You're not. A silence fell over the room like lead. Then, without a word, one of the auditors turned to Eli. Could we speak with you privately? He nodded. They didn't walk him down the hallway. They escorted him, like he was the one person in the building who knew the location of the black box. I stood there and watched Martin deflate. Literally deflate. His mouth worked like he had something to say, but the words got caught in his throat. He looked around, hoping someone, anyone, would step in. No one did. The rest of us just kept our heads down and screens on, pretending to work, pretending not to watch the man who used to laugh too loud in meetings now stare at a screen he could no longer control. In that private room, I heard later, Eli didn't ask for anything. No credit, no promotion, no revenge. He just answered every question, patiently, thoroughly, like someone who had lived inside the policy, not just written it. And for the first time since he joined Beventech, the room actually listened. By Thursday morning, Martin was no longer pacing. He was planted at his desk, eyes red, one hand gripping a stress ball so hard I thought it might burst. The office had shifted. Not dramatically, no one said anything out loud, but you could feel the weight rearrange itself. You know that moment in a wildfire when the wind changes direction? That's what this felt like. Martin's narrative didn't just crack, it caved in. HR set up in conference room C. No calendar invites, just names whispered down the line. First procurement, then legal ops, then compliance. The voluntary check-ins weren't optional and everyone knew why. Martin tried to act like nothing had changed, like he was still in control. But every minute that passed, his office felt less like a command post and more like a crime scene. What undid him, in the end, wasn't the edits, wasn't the clause deletions or even the overwritten logs. It was metadata, because when the auditors exported the final compliance PDF, Martin's proudly submitted, fully authorized masterpiece, it carried a faint, irrefutable signature. Author, E. Alvarez. The kid had used proper document settings, version control, built-in ID tagging, the kind of stuff no one checks, until someone really checks. The board caught wind of the audit fallout sometime around noon. That's when one of the executive assistants, a woman with a terrifying memory and no tolerance for drama, told me the general counsel's inbox got hit with a very simple email from the board. Who authorized the final policy version? Find original author. Report by EOD. Simple. Cold. Fatal. Legal couldn't scrub it. AT tried. But the archive records and drive history were gospel. The compliance server showed Eli's original draft was the first to be uploaded. Then it was accessed by Martin's credentials 3 hours later. Edits made, comments removed, language neutered, autosave disabled, a manual export to PDF, time-stamped, and submitted via the internal doc portal under Martin's login. But that sneaky little tag in the document properties? Still read. Author, E. Alvarez. The moment that circulated, it was over. You could see it in legal's faces, in HR's sudden shift from "let's talk this out" to "we'll need a written statement," in IT's quiet confirmation that, yes, Martin had admin-level access, but no authority to remove co-authorship without documentation. They called Eli into a separate room again, not to question him, to brief him. There was something about the way he walked now, same calm steps, same low voice, but heavier. Like every ounce of restraint he'd held back since the day Martin called him Junior had finally condensed into gravity. I watched from across the floor as Martin tried to intercept him outside the glass hallway. Put a hand up. Mutter something like, "Let's just talk." Maybe it was a plea. Maybe it was desperation masked as mentorship. Either way, Eli didn't break stride. He didn't even look at him. And that, somehow, made it worse than any shouted comeback ever could. Afterward, when Eli returned to his desk, he didn't gloat, didn't celebrate. He just opened a new folder, labeled it Post-Review Final Authority. Then he sat back, like a man watching a fire line burn exactly where he knew it would. Contained, predicted, controlled. The rest of us? We were just hoping the wind didn't shift again. The debrief wasn't in the usual sterile conference room. They cleared the top floor executive boardroom for it, like dressing a wound with velvet gloves. 12 chairs, one long glass table, regulators on one side, legal, HR, and a compliance rep on the other. And in the middle, Martin, looking like he hadn't slept in 3 days, collar wrinkled, tie slightly askew like it had turned on him overnight. I sat 2 seats down from Eli. He didn't fidget, didn't take notes, just watched, quietly, like someone who'd already lived through this once in his head and was now just waiting for the scene to catch up. The lead auditor flipped through her folder slowly, page after page of red-inked violations, mismatched clause references, and misaligned timelines. Then she stopped, tapped the document with a single fingernail, and looked directly at Martin. Who signed this revision? 6 words. Simple. Lethal. Martin opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Legal shifted in their chairs. Someone cleared their throat, and then Martin finally found words, the way someone finds a life raft after the ship's already gone under. I authorized the final draft, yes, but it was collaborative. The language was built from team contributions. I was consolidating input from junior staff, and the auditor held up a hand. We didn't ask who consolidated. We asked who signed. And then, for the first time in the entire mess, the room turned, physically, deliberately, toward Eli. He didn't blink. I did, he said calmly. But not the one you reviewed. He reached into his folder and pulled out a single printed copy. No highlighter marks, no scribbles, just clean formatting, statute numbers hyperlinked in blue, appendix tabs poking out like soldier rows. He slid it across the table. Quiet, controlled, undeniable. The auditor picked it up, read the first few lines, then nodded. Once, decisively. This, she said, would have passed. You could hear someone exhale across the room. Martin sank lower in his chair, hands clenched so tight they shook. It's not the final version, he muttered. It wasn't approved. He was an analyst, not a signatory. I didn't know the metadata carried over. You didn't check, Legal interrupted, voice neutral but fraying at the edges. You removed his contributions, changed authorship, and submitted under your own login. That's forgery, Martin, and you know it. I was under pressure, he snapped. We all were. The partner breach, the timelines, and Eli flagged those risks before you ever touched the file, the HR lead added. Twice, in writing, with time-stamped logs. That's when the conversation shifted. The lead regulator closed her binder, looked around the table, and said, We'll be escalating this for formal review. Policy misrepresentation of the scale, especially post-breach, puts your vendor eligibility at risk. Then she stood. Martin didn't. He just sat there, eyes darting, watching the ground disappear beneath him one clause at a time. By the end of the hour, the board had been looped in. By end of day, Martin's badge access was revoked. Pending full investigation. No dramatic exit. No box of belongings. Just an email circulated at 4:52 p.m. titled Temporary Administrative Leave, M. Vexler. Most people didn't even read the full body. They were too busy watching Eli. He didn't speak much that day. Just packed his folder, shut his laptop, and nodded at a few of us on his way out. But there was something different in the way people looked at him now. Not like the kid, not even like the analyst who got it right. More like the man who signed the real version and didn't need anyone's permission to do it. It didn't make the front page of the industry bulletin, but it might as well have. A 1-paragraph press release buried on the Beventech site's Compliance Updates tab. We extend our apologies to the Oversight Division for discrepancies found in our documentation. We are reviewing internal processes to ensure future alignment. No names, no blame, just corporate penance in Helvetica. Internally, the message was louder. Compliance training was paused indefinitely. All vendor relationships flagged for review. Every department was ordered to recertify on interagency protocols within 30 days. And somewhere in that avalanche of sudden virtue signaling, a quiet announcement landed in our inboxes. Effective immediately, a Policy Integrity Council has been formed to oversee cross-departmental alignment. One name on that council stuck out: Eli Alvarez. No fanfare, no town hall, just a line like it had always been there. And Eli? He didn't change overnight. Still showed up on time. Still brought that awful gas station coffee in the metal thermos that looked like it survived a car fire. But his desk got moved, closer to legal, within eyeshot of the director's suite. People stopped calling him the kid. They started asking for his opinion, and they listened. One afternoon, I watched him finish a call and open his laptop to find a new message from Director S. Lovell. Subject: thank you. Message: your work saved us. Quietly, efficiently, we noticed. S. He didn't react, just flagged it, archived it, and opened a draft document titled Policy 5th, Encryption Exceptions Review. No smile, no triumph, just movement forward. Later that week, HR sent out an update titled Organizational Realignment Phase 2, 4 paragraphs of filler, one chart of the new reporting structure. Martin's name was gone, erased like he'd never existed. No farewell party, no legacy slideshow, just deletion. Someone asked around what had happened to him. Consulting, they whispered, taking time to recalibrate. But we all knew. You don't recalibrate after gutting your company's audit credibility. You just vanish into contractor purgatory. That same day, I caught a glimpse of Eli in the reflection of the break room glass. He was standing alone, looking out across the atrium like he was trying to see something nobody else could. I walked up behind him. You okay? He nodded. Just thinking. About? He glanced over. How easy it is to sign something wrong, and how much harder it is to sign it right. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just stood there with him. In the silence, I realized something. This wasn't his victory lap. It was his correction. Not revenge, not reward. Just doing it right. Because someone had to. It showed up without a memo, without a Slack ping, without any collab-requested tag. Just a new file in the shared compliance drive, titled cleanly, Inti Comp Final EAV1. It didn't need an announcement. We all knew what it was. The new policy draft. Fully overhauled. Hyperlinked to live databases. Statute locked. No fluff. No filler. No dead language. Each section structured like it had weight. Because it did. Clause 9.1 was so elegantly built it got bookmarked by legal. Clause 14C was already being quoted in partner onboarding sessions, and at the bottom of every page in quiet gray font, authored by E. Alvarez. Nobody questioned it. Nobody second-guessed it. In a company where every doc passed through 6 hands and 3 delays, this one stood untouched. Untouchable. It wasn't just a policy. It was precedent. And Eli? He didn't gloat. Didn't send a team-wide email or pin a quote to his door. Just walked, steady and silent, up to the top floor when summoned. The room was smaller than you'd think. Not the boardroom, not HR's favorite glass box. Just a private corner conference room with soundproof walls and a view of the commuter rail. The general counsel sat across from him, arms folded. 2 board members, both old enough to remember carbon paper, watched him like he was a living audit report. They didn't open with pleasantries, didn't waste breath asking him how he felt about Martin or the policy council or the restructuring. They just slid a small black lanyard across the table. No speech, no contract summary, just the badge. White letters on black laminate, policy and integrity lead, advisor to board. Eli picked it up without hesitation. Turned it over once, pocketed it, that was it. No photo op, no handshake loop, just a chair at the table. Finally pulled out for the person who'd been building the table's foundation the entire time. Later that day, someone asked me what he said in the room. I told them the truth. He didn't say much, but when I passed him in the hallway, heading back from a legal review, he paused. You know what's funny? He said, eyes still distant, voice low. What? He smiled. Barely, just enough. Too young to understand policy, he said, echoing the insult like it was part of an inside joke only he got. Maybe, but not too young to fix it. Then he nodded and kept walking, past the badge scanners, past the posters about ethics, into the room where decisions are made by the people who never expected him to be one of them. But there he was, earned, not invited.